to do gardening on their own. So I was studying this long before I moved out into the country. One other big advantage of the country life, property is a lot cheaper. It really is. The prices in town, in Lancaster, after the housing prices fell, still in about $150 to $200 for a house. Now I know people down here think that's ridiculously cheap, but that's the expensive part of the Antelope Valley. Out in Lake LA, I bought my house for $95. Houses have continued to fall. I know that if you look at the low end, the foreclosures that they messed up the place before they were thrown out, those can go for $45. Which
how many acres?
Every house in the Antelope Valley has between 1/2 and 1 acre. Most of them have 2/3 of an acre. In Lake LA. Yes, every house in Lake LA the average is 2/3 acre. Most of them have 2/3. Some go down to 1/2 and some go up to a full acre. Country prices are cheaper. Of course, you're also a little farther out. You'll be a little more dependent upon your car unless you have a good job a good commute route. In my case, it didn't matter because the Air Force Base was just as distant from the city as it was from the country. Worked out for me, but I have not actually tested the miles. I know it takes me 35 minutes to get to work unless there's a backup at the gate. I haven't actually measured the mile. I think it's 28 miles. That's another reason we're in the country, so she can. We are planning on homeschooling, and that is when we plan on even having our kid help on the farm as part of his education. The fact that I'm actually doing this shows how much I think it's important, because I used to live in the country a long time ago, had a horrible experience there, but that's okay. It was West Virginia. It doesn't count as actual country. It counts as the armpit of the nation. Yes. I personally do enjoy the city life, but I felt it was necessary and important to do this, which is why I did it. I felt trying to achieve a greater degree of self-sufficiency was the ultimate goal. Now, very long-term plans, after we get the goats and after we get all our fences put up, eventually we would like to install solar power. Disconnect just a little bit more from the grid. First we have our own well, then we have our own solar power. And of course, if you're in the Antelope Valley, we have an advantage. There's natural wind power there. Every evening we get steady, solid west wind. Actually, it's windy almost all the time up there. Once upon a time, the wind stopped and every single chicken and boron fell over. Yes. So yes, we have a natural supply of wind. There are actually people even in town who have their own windmills to help them supply power. And of course, being the high desert, a lot of people have solar. Solar is actually the most expensive possible improvement. I've checked it out. Probably about 20 grand for a full solar kit. So that's very long-term, way down the road after we've got everything else put up. But that is our long-term goal. For now, it's to finish our fences, to get our chicken coop set up, and expand our planting so that next year we can do better. Plus to acidify our soil since it's pretty alkaline up there in the desert. Yes?
Yes, are you going to use a windmill for your pumping of the water?
Are we going to use a windmill for the pumping of the water? No. And at our elevation where I'm at, the water is 180 feet down. I needed to get a 1 horsepower, 240 volt pump in order to get the water up that high. And that rate, it pumps about 10 gallons per minute, that deep. If it were shallower, it would pump faster, but it has a lot of pressure to overcome. So yes, I'm going to have to use a true electric pump and plug it into 240 volt power. Yes?
It sounds like you're trying to be real sustainable. Are you using organic gardening methods?
Yes, and it's not out of any philosophy. It's because when you're on a farm, you don't let stuff go to waste. I have in my freezer a bucket of meat scraps that I use to plant under the corn. It's not high quality meat scraps. It's mostly chicken bones and fish bones, but it is meat scraps. I have a compost heap that I'm using for the plant matter, not because I have some green philosophy of doing so, but because it's free. After I pull up the corn, I throw it on the compost heap. Next year I use it to plant. It's free. I don't need to go and buy fertilizer for it.
How is your soil? Do you have to do much to the soil?
How is the soil? The soil up where I'm at is pretty alkaline, and we have a rich sandy loam. The only real problem is that it's alkaline. The Antelope Valley is ridiculously fertile. If you add just a little bit of water, it turns green in a heartbeat. We notice that every time it rains, suddenly the next day the valley is as green as anywhere else in South Cal. But it only lasts a couple days because we don't get rain very often. But the soil is very, very rich, a nice, rich, sandy loam. So that's why we need to add water for our farm. It's why we're trying to build a well. Yes?
You might as well go all the way. Do you make your own wine and beer?
I've been doing that since long before I started the farm. Yes, I started making my own wine back when I was in college. Many, many years ago, I found a recipe for homemade wines, and I've since then become quite good at it. Any fruit can become a wine. I've made honey, cherry, strawberry, lemon, orange, pumpkin, pomegranate, cranberry. Cranberry you have to be very careful with because cranberry gels quite naturally. You have to mix it up a few times after it's done to help get the actual sediment out, and then you can still chew on your wine. That actually brings you to another topic, storage. Storing food from your garden, because while your garden is growing, it'll grow more than you can eat, which means you want to store it for the rest of the year. And the best way to do that, well, of course, the way that tastes best is freezing, but freezers have only so much space. The way that is most efficient is canning. And of course, there's making jellies and jams. Now, most people, since they're familiar with supermarket jellies, don't think of jelly as a serving of fruit. Well, a supermarket jelly isn't. But if you make your own jam, it is a serving of fruit. That's how people used to get through the winter with their lack of fruits. And cheese is a serving of dairy, which everyone knows. But when your goats are out of season, when your goats are in season, they're producing more milk than you can drink. When they're out of season, they're not producing any. You make up the rest of the year with by making the leftover milk into cheese. So you store things, and eggs are the hardest to store. They don't freeze well. They don't can well. The only thing you can pickle them, you can hard boil them, or you can make them into a custard with the milk. And that is actually about the best way to store egg is with custards. Then you can the custard. But because eggs really don't store. In fact, if you have too many eggs, give them to a neighbor, or trade them with a neighbor, actually. Find a neighbor who's also got the same farming philosophy but doesn't have chickens, trade for something. Find that sheep farmer, get a bag of wool. Or something. It can be anything. Since we're planning on having only a few goats, we're of course not having a buck, so we're going to go to a professional farmer for that. Hopefully he'll use the buck instead of himself, and then our goats will. Then we can, with our abundance of eggs, we can trade with him for that if he's willing. So that's so storing the food. It works for everything, just about everything except eggs. We are not planning on sheep because they don't produce very much milk, and our primary goal is the sustainable food source. Yes? What kind of goats am I planning on getting? I'm planning on getting Nubians, or at least mixed Nubians, because Nubians are actually a breed of goat that was bred in Africa, which is very used to hot temperatures. And while you have the ocean breezes down here, I don't. And we have 114-degree days up there sometimes. Not often, but just enough so that we know that we're on the other side of the mountains from you. So Nubian goats are the best breed for us to get because of their tolerance for hot climates. Yes.
My great grandfather dug a cellar under his garage so he could store food at 55 degrees year round. Are you going to do something like that?
We're considering that. The problem is we haven't picked a place to do such a thing yet. We're still plotting things out. The other problem is county records are not telling us where the septic tank is, and we don't want to dig into that. But yes, we would like to try to dig a cellar and help store things for a number of reasons. One, I want to